Hello and welcome to Writer to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer. My guest today is Jack Bowie, author of the Adam Braxton Thriller series. Jack was born and raised outside of Cleveland, Ohio, then headed to Cambridge, Massachusetts to attend MIT. After graduating, he held technical management positions in the public and private sectors. He started writing during a break from professional duties, and luckily for us, he developed a passion for storytelling. His Adam Braxton series follows a tenacious cybersecurity consultant into the opportunities and dangers of high tech. Jack splits his time between homes in New Hampshire and Georgia, where he lives with his wife Sharon and a lovable but very stubborn Shih Tzu. Hi, Jack. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing just fine, Kat. Thank you.
So, is your Shih Tzu an office buddy?
Not usually. She usually runs around and hides with my wife more than me. So
Okay.
I think we'll probably be safe for a while.
Okay. So you have written at least 8 books, not counting the Capital Gambit, which listeners is available free to anyone who subscribes to Jack's monthly newsletter. Would you tell us about that?
Sure. So I have I guess I'd say usually monthly newsletter where I talk a little bit about what I'm up to and what things are going on. It's the typical thing, and it's book date updates and personal stories, some things about any giveaways I know of, and I even include a couple of jokes. So, which is actually last time I looked, like 33% of the people that read the newsletter like the joke, so
Like
I
the
can't be
jokes.
all that bad. And so to get the newsletter, all you have to do is sign up on my website, and I'm sure Kat's put a link up there for you. And with that, you can download an ebook, The Capital Gambit. And that's a prequel I did 6 or 7 years ago that kind of gives a backstory on some of the characters that are in the main series. And folks seem to like it. So again, it's free for anyone that signs up for the newsletter.
I love prequels, so yeah, everybody should go and look at that. And it's a nice way to sample too. So if you have not
Oh, this is
heard of
true.
this author, it's always a good way of finding out who they are. So are all of your books techno thrillers?
Yes, the series Techno Thrillers is kind of a generic term, but they're definitely all thrillers. And each one has, I guess, what I'd call a theme or a technical theme. I've written about information security. I've written about biotechnology, uh, genetic profiling, drones, AI, a number of different things. But each book really has that kind of theme that goes through the story.
Yeah, I'm privy to one of your works yet and hasn't been released, and you've got me afraid to sleep with earplugs now. So, listeners,
Well, yes, okay. I mean that is always a danger, but things always work out at the end, right?
yeah,
So
it's
it's okay.
funny. It's really quite got me thinking though. I was really surprised at some of the stuff that we don't even think about. So, for listeners who have yet to discover your work, would you please talk about your series? Who is Adam Braxton? What ties the books together, and who are some of the recurrent characters?
Well, as you mentioned, Adam Braxton is a cybersecurity consultant who starts off in the first book as kind of this lone guy that stumbles into some nefarious plot, obviously, it's a thriller, and has to find his way out of it. Over the course of the series, I brought him and a number of friends together, if you will. There's a crusty old ex Washington, D.C. cop that joins him, a retired intelligence agent, um, an FBI special agent, assistant director, actually, and even an old CIA officer that kind of runs around Langley and does things. It's interesting that any of these parts of his friends, if you will, could be both the cause and the solution to his next problem. So they're always getting themselves in trouble and trying to find a way to get out.
Yeah, I really like them. And I started reading different genre than I normally did because I was doing this program, but I have become a real big fan of thrillers, and it wasn't something that I originally read. So I'm qualified to say your books are really good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a genre I've always enjoyed, and so some of that I think probably makes its way into the stories as well.
Yeah. And each stands alone, correct? They can be read in any order.
Yes, I kind of wanted to do that. It is a series. It's like your episodic TV programs, right? I mean, you can jump into a to an episode at any time and kind of find out what's going on. And I try to spend a little bit of time giving enough backstory on the characters so you can understand what's going on. But of course, we all hope that after you've read one, you want to go back and read all the others and get caught up. So that's always a hope, but they are standalone.
Well, I started with book 7, Kodiak Countdown, and I'm making my way through the rest, and I can attest that they're addictive. One leads to two, which becomes three, and the reader dearly hopes you stay ahead of the need to read the next one. Can you tell us some of the challenges of writing a series?
Um, I mean, in some ways, you should think a series ought to be easy, right? Because you got the same characters and you just kind of throw them in situations. Um, I think the real trick of doing a series correctly is that one, the characters have to evolve. As I said, Adam Braxton starts off as this kind of underappreciated loan consultant and works his way up to having his own company and dealing with all these other people. And the other characters have their own character arcs that they need to go through. I must say, one of the things that I find the hardest is that I like to bring characters back. So the bad guy that got away in book 3 suddenly appears in book 7, and he's doing nefarious things. One doesn't want in book 7 for the tall, slender, blue-eyed man in book 3 to have been fat and stubby and brown-eyed.
Yeah.
So there's this, and I have readers who would like nothing better than to catch me on some of these little faux pas as time goes on. So keeping track of who did what to whom during the course of the series, I think is probably the most challenging thing. And not being repetitious, obviously, not putting the same people in the same problems all the time. That's a little bit easier, but I think it's the character continuity and development. That's
That
probably the most difficult part.
that and catching people up without information dumps, and you do that very well. So for anybody
Thank you.
starting with not book 1, you're going to know right away who the characters are, and you're going to know what's going on. It's not something that you have to go back and say, well, who was that? I don't know who that is. You always tell us, and we always have a really good idea very quickly what is happening, even if we haven't been there before. So that's really good. So how do you pick
Thanks.
your titles, and when do you pick them?
That's always a challenge. Actually, how do I pick my titles? Again, a little bit easy. We talked about thrillers, and I really enjoyed thrillers as I was growing up, and as time went on. And Robert Ludlum was one of my favorite thriller writers, and he had these kind of catchy 2-noun titles: The Bourne Identity, The Matteries Circle.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of cool. So as a tribute to him, I guess more than anything else, I've taken the same style. So I have the Saracen Incident, the Jason Betrayal. You mentioned the Kodiak Countdown.
Yeah.
And so they all kind of have the same feel. It just felt like the right thing to do for me. As to when I do it, that's a little bit harder.
Okay.
I know some people said, oh, you must have the title right away as soon as you get the idea for the book, and not a chance. I mean, it usually takes me at least halfway through the writing before I kind of get this sense of, okay, the story has gone this way, and this would be the right set of words to describe either what's going to happen or who it's happening to. Kodiak Countdown, as some of you may have guessed, a lot of that occurs on Kodiak Island in Alaska. So that's the kind of tie-in that I'm looking for, but it takes a while. Definitely.
Yeah. And I know writers have different styles for that. I personally know one writer who actually comes up with the title first and then writes the story to that. I've never been able to figure out how anyone could do that. So,
yeah, not what I would do, certainly, or I could
No.
do, I guess, at all.
No, she's way better at fleshing things out than I know. So where do your ideas come from? Or are any of the plots based in real life?
To some extent, I would say all the plots are based in real life. I mean, I tend to get my stories from reading I do and in magazines or listening to news or something like that, and you'll be sitting around, and it's the typical kind of a what if scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see something on the news, and you'll say, "Well, that's really interesting." Um, it's a terrible thing, but I remember watching the the bridge destruction in Baltimore and
Yes.
seeing that on TV and thinking, gee, I wonder why somebody would have wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And did they want to hold a ship in Baltimore? Did they want to keep something out of Baltimore Harbor? And why? And so this is the kind of thing that goes through, my screwy mind from time to time. And we may talk a little bit more about this later, but yeah, they're all basically oriented around things that happen, things I read, things that other people tell me.
Yeah. What if it went a different way? Or like you said, what's behind that really? Because they haven't told us. They're just,
Exactly.
there's the story, but you don't know why. So your latest is the Eliza Prophecy. It sounds like reviewers love it. James R. Preston, author of Surf City Mysteries, wrote, I thoroughly enjoyed the Eliza Prophecy, and equally important, it made me think. This is a very good thriller with compelling characters and a satisfying, twisty plot. Add to that a serious consideration of artificial intelligence, and the book's a winner. I would love for you to talk about this new Adam Braxton thriller. What's the plot? And well, some of the characters are, people that we would have met before, but who are the new people?
Um, yeah, the new people. Let me maybe start there. The new people. One of the new people is an old person, someone that came back from the past that's orchestrating a whole bunch of things. Another new person is a newspaper reporter, which is surprising. I haven't had a newspaper reporter before, and so I introduced this one, and he has some personal background that um, lent itself to, I think, the story pretty well. Um, Actually, I started writing the story when the whole Chat GPT hype was exploding, and I said, well, okay, I really need to write an AI. I hadn't written a good hard AI story before. I said, okay, I got to write a good AI story, but I didn't want to, evil AI takes over the
Yeah.
world meme. I mean, that's done much too much, and that's just not where I was. Um, Personally, I believe a lot of the significant effects of AI are going to be much more subtle, and they're going to be related to social and personal issues more than this take over the world phenomenon that people have. So I wanted to write something that showed how today's advances could affect or even drive people's passions in dangerous ways.
Hmm.
Um, so that's essentially the story, and how our characters discover what is behind all this, and how they extract themselves from and the rest of the world from the problems. And I hope readers enjoy the thriller aspect, but I also hope, uh, as you mentioned, that that helps people think a little bit about some of these issues. I like to include a little bit of humor and a little bit of education in my book. So if it makes you think about AI a little bit differently, then yeah, I'd say that that would be successful.
Yeah. It's
Now,
definitely,
I will say, I'm sorry,
no, no, no,
I
go
did
ahead.
just want to say that, by the way, um, it's Eliza Prophecy, and the Eliza is the name of a computer program that
Okay.
Professor Joseph Weizenbaum from MIT wrote in the 1960s. Okay, so this is like 60 years ago, right? He wrote this program that that implemented an interaction with the user in the way that a therapist might. So the
Okay.
conversation would kind of go like this. Well, gee, Jack, how are you today? Well, I'm feeling pretty sad. Why are you sad, Jack? My goldfish died. Oh, that is sad. Why did your goldfish die? And it continued in this fashion. Obviously, all it was doing was looking at patterns in the user's response and kind of turning them around and putting them in a question and putting them back to him. Certainly not the advanced chatbots that we see today, but it caused an immense stir in the industry. You know, oh, it's computers are going to take over the world and they understand all these things and they're so intelligent, when it was really just such a simple thing. But it was a precursor. It did start all of this work that we're now seeing in AI. And one might guess that a similar kind of a program plays a part in the Eliza Prophecy as well. So it was kind of fun.
It's amazing to me how far back this tech goes. Was talking to a couple of friends earlier this week about how long it's been that we've had cell phones, and how much more powerful our cell phones are than the computer that sent the men to the moon. Okay, and all this stuff. But there were things. I'll never forget the first time I used a word processor, and I thought I'll never use a typewriter again. And I was against it. So the technology can be great, but also AI is scaring people, I think, just because there have been a lot of dystopian stories preceding the actual ability to do anything. So yeah. So your characters are extremely well fleshed out. The dialogue in your books flows very well, and the voices are distinct. How do you create the characters?
Oh. Coming up with the characters, I think, is something that happens organically when you come up with a plot and you're going to say, well, I need to have this kind of a person doing this kind of a thing, and then another person comes in and does that. So you can kind of flesh out the threads, if you will, of the various parts of the stories. Then you got to create characters that implement those threads and that live in those threads. That tends to be a little bit harder. They don't emerge from day one. You kind of write some and then you write a little more and you say, oh, okay, well, maybe this character ought to do that. So it takes a while to flesh out the characters. I don't know that there's any magic to it. I know authors that will say, well, character X was drawn from my experience when I worked for, company ABC, and it was this awful man. And I don't really feel that way. I guess I've met enough people over the course of my life that I can kind of pull some ideas and some characters together. But you basically come up with the characters and then give them a presence.
Yeah.
So, well, how do they talk? Do they talk very formally? So I have some scientists that I put in the book, and they talk the way academic scientists would talk. It's a very formal language. And my crusty ex-cop is a little more informal in the way he talks. And by putting that in dialogue, I think you can help the reader keep track of who they are, as you mentioned earlier, because you don't want to keep having these tags. This is John said and Fred said and John said. If you can signal by the words they use, are they snide? Are they snarky? How do they do things? It really helps, I think, the reader understand the story better.
I think so. And I've noticed that sometimes I can identify, especially your more colorful characters, their dialect is something that you can identify right away, and before anybody even says, who's talking in the room. So yeah, there's a voice there. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think you have something special to tell us about what's next. Is that true?
Yes, I have been working on a new book, as one would expect, the next in the series. And I thought what we could do this evening is basically give you a title reveal. Okay.
Ooh, okay.
So the title of the next thriller is The Oxford Protocol.
Okay.
Now I'm not going to talk very much about the book. What fun would that be, right? I don't want to say a whole lot more, but we were talking earlier about where do you get your storylines. So I was up late one night watching television, kind of watching the screen go by, and I saw a really kind of odd commercial for yet another fitness watch. I mean, why do we need another fitness watch in the world, right? But this was being advertised on television as the greatest thing that was going on. And it really got me thinking about all the digital devices that we wear and carry on us all the time, that kind of monitors our health and helps keep us organized. There's really quite a few. There's a lot of these things that we all carry around and deal with. And so it kind of came to me, well, what if one of those devices did a little bit more than was advertised? And I'm going to stop there. And so now you're going to have to wait. But I will, talk more about the book as we go. I hope it's going to be available in the fall. But we'll be talking more about it in my newsletter and on the website. So please feel free to give that a look as we go forward.
So
but it is the Oxford Protocol.
Okay. And unintended consequences or a little bit of evil there?
Oh, come on now. Okay. I'm going to have to make you work for that one.
I think it's really an interesting, I've heard a little bit of this story and I really am interested in it. And it really struck a nerve with me because my husband uses the watch that keeps track of your heart rate and your steps and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And he accidentally wore it to bed one night. And then the next morning it gave him some information that actually made him go to the doctor. He looked at the heart rate and stuff and he said, what's going on here? And it turned out that he was having some problems with sleeping and he needed some medical intervention. So that was kind of cool. And I personally sleep with earbuds, as I mentioned. And the reason I do that is because if the cat just, walks across the floor, I wake up. I don't know if this is left over from being a mother, but I sleep with Rain. And because my husband hates that. So it has to be personal Rain. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, we all do this. And I think hopefully this is a story that will kind of resonate with people as they think about their own lives. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah. So is there a question I haven't asked that you would like me to have asked?
I really don't think there's a question that I want to answer, but I'll turn that around and say I really would like to give a thanks and a shout out to all the people that are out there in the world that support my writing. I think, many people think, well, a writer will sit down and they'll sit on a laptop and, pick away and come up with 70,000 words and throw this out all by themselves. I don't know too many authors that do that. We all have this tribe around us that gives us support, certainly our family. But on a more specific basis, I'm a part of 2 critique groups. And so these are folks that sit around and read this awful stuff that we produce initially and help us turn it into something that's reasonable. The beta readers that we have that kind of look at that final draft. But I have some specialists. I have a couple of physicians that I know that kind of help keep me honest about healthcare things. Some law enforcement professionals, retired and otherwise, that'll, no, Jack, that's a stupid way. Cops don't really work that way. And they'll tell me how all these things work. So, and there's an enormous number of other people that I, won't mention, but they know who they are. So I really just wanted to make sure that I publicly gave a thank you to all of them for helping me in this crazy journey and helping me make, my books a little bit better than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, it's kind of you to do that, but it's also really interesting. We don't have a lot of aspiring writers in the audience, but there are some. And that's one of the things that people ask me a lot. They tell isn't it lonely writing? It used to be. I don't know if it used to be. I've been involved in critique groups since, I don't know. I was looking at it the other day, 35 years on and off. The only difference now is I don't have to be there. We can all meet on Zoom. So yeah,
I'll share an interesting story, I think, that I have. And I was writing a story and I had a need for Adam Braxton to go flying off to Europe, right, in a somewhat clandestine fashion. So I said, well, let's see, how is he going to do that? He's going to go off and fly, I think it's a C-130. I don't really know anything about airplanes like that. So I said, oh, what the heck? And I was down in Atlanta, and I called up the Lockheed Martin public relations office on the airfield down in Atlanta and said, gee, could I talk to somebody about C-130s? And I just got this wonderful lady. And we spent conversation after conversation. She told me all about the insides of the plane and what it was like. And people really like to talk to authors.
Yeah.
So, for all those prospective authors out there, don't be afraid to ask people and talk to people and have them give you some feedback on what they know, because none of us know enough to do all this by themselves. And I've just consistently gotten that kind of response as I have reached out to other folks with questions. They've all been really helpful, and it's really been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad to hear that. And I know awful lot of people that have run up against the same thing. The biggest question for some of the aspiring authors, or even people who are just getting started, is, well, do they even want to talk to me? Sure they do. People love to talk about what they do. They love to be, yeah, they're happy to tell you what they know. So yeah. And if they don't, someone else will. So,
Yeah, put a little bit of the hard skin on and just go for it.
yeah.
And I bet most of the time you're going to have a very positive response.
Yeah. Yep. I think so. So Jack, it has been an honor. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Listeners, as always, I will post all the links below where you can find Jack's work, stay abreast of his passion projects, and please, if you do read and like his work, please don't forget to leave a review. Authors rely on that. And you don't have to write a lot. You don't have to write a novel. Just stars is fine. Just do that. And please like and subscribe to, if they have an author newsletter or anything like that, because that's the same as like and subscribe in this world. And on that note, I would like to remind listeners to please like and subscribe to Writer so you'll never miss an episode. And I know some of you have nominated authors for future episodes. The way you'll know is when you get that little ding. It was so good to talk to you, Jack. I'm looking forward to seeing again soon.
It's really been fun. Appreciate it.